So you have 20 minutes. Let's say, try to make it fit in 2025. It'll be fast. So thank you for receiving me. And it's a very specific keynote for me because first things first, I found it this morning. This is the very first exchange between Mehdi Medjawi and myself 10 years ago. You can check the dates. That was before Apidays was even a name. And he wanted to see Fabernovel to discuss around APIs and the fact that we should co-promote APIs. So I just wanted, he's not here, but I just wanted to thank him because we've been consistently talking at the introductions of Apidays for 10 years, and it's been a very, very interesting 10 years. The second thing is that I presented that very slide 10 years ago. That was the first Apidays ever. It was in Paris. It was in Épitain, the south of Paris. And 10 years is a long time. To give you an idea, I tried to think about it coming in. And I thought, 10 years ago, the mother of my grandson was a teenager. So that gives you an idea of what 10 years encompasses. And I was wondering, because the question is what should we prepare for in the next 10 years? Have we been wrong all the time? Because I've been presenting that slide to corporations, to events, to negotiations, to briefs, like probably more than 300 times in the past 10 years. Everybody says, you're right. This is the ideal kind of API environment for a corporation, and if we had that, we probably would do much more projects, API-based, etc., in large corporations such as L'Oréal, Pernod Ricard, Saint-Gobain, Engie, to quote a few. And from the API ecosystem perspective, it doesn't really happen. Everybody's struggling to sell, everybody's struggling to get enough business, and unfortunately, these are very, very, very recent numbers. They are from 1 week ago. There is still 40% of startups, and of course, including technological startups. And I saw a lot of them that have been there for years in the hall, but some of them are not anymore, that are still not making it because of neither funding, neither revenue, which is in 2022, 10 years after we started the API movement, kind of sad. But the good news for me, and that was my question, my answer to what's going to happen in the next 10 years, is that 60% just have bad sales and marketing. When I say just have, is that the good news is that it's just bad sales and marketing. In theory, hire a sales guy and listen to him, hire a marketer and listen to him. It's a little trickier than that, but I think it's really going to be the challenge for the next 10 years for a lot of tech companies. I took the liberty before starting to take a walk in the aisles and watch all the stands, and I thought that we are still very much talking to ourselves. API management, about APIs, robustness, about API, about API, about API. The problem we're going to have is that a lot of brands, this is Nike, for instance, which is a brand that succeeded in transforming itself, it's half a software company, don't really care anymore about tech and APIs. Although they are using it constantly and daily, this is the small piece of the panorama of the new software that Nike is producing to help you consume your shoes. And that helps him enhance his business. Nike is doing very, very, very well on the running side because they use technologies to enhance their experience. They don't care about tech. If you also look at the ecosystem of fintech, which is one I work a lot on, same thing. Lot of cool customer experience being produced. Lot of mashup and mashups, and embedded finance is becoming a big thing in banks. Everything is going very, very well, and the customers are using that. But what's that's creating, and I think that's kind of the difficulty, is that while maybe 10 or 5 or 6 years ago the market was buying APIs, when I say the market, I'm talking about large clients and corporations, etc. Today, they just want to enable user experience or employee experience or supplier experience or global experiences, but they don't buy APIs by themselves anymore, which is kind of a natural movement. I'm an old-timer of technologies, and I started at a very, very old time in the end of the 80s. At that time, people did not even know if they should buy a word processor because they did not know what it was. We are kind of the same cycle. Now it's becoming mundane. Now it's standardized. Now I don't meet any more skepticism in any company around is API the right model to deploy agility and to deploy new applications, etc. The reality and the problem is that because of that, because it's standardized, no marketing or customer experience or employee experience is starting to want some stuff on smartphones. And they are not buying APIs or technologies, they are buying solutions to enable something new. And that's very, very frustrating when you come from tech. Why? Because, you know, you spend 10 years as an API community to build APIs, tools to manage them, tools to expose them, tools to make sure that they are used, and you end up, because it worked, in the position of the plumber. And like I always say, it's kind of frustrating because I never call my plumber to thank him because I haven't had to call him for 3 years. I only call him to yell at him because you came 6 years ago and it was working and now it's not working anymore. So I think plumber is a very frustrating trade. It's at the same time something that's, unavoidable, indispensable, should be probably much more paid, although when they come in an emergency, they kind of manage to get very well paid. But it's not kind of, glorious like marketing, like finance trade. And I think the community will feel some hurt because, we've worked hard, we made it a standard, now it works. And, there's less focus, paradoxically, on tech than there was when we were talking about that 10 years ago. But there's good news and challenges. The first one is that everything comes from the fact that now that everybody uses tech, we are concentrated on the outcomes. To go on Nike, for instance, these are two things that Nike do that I love. The first one is an application and some application in store where you can very, very rapidly measure your exact size of shoes so you can start running with fit shoes, which is very, very important when you start running or when you run. And some stuff that are very more consumer-oriented or interesting, like they do boxes to help you have shoes for your children when they're between 0 to 5-year-old, which is the time when they need new shoes every 6 months, roughly. And you keep on buying shoes. So those two things are outcomes. They are probably in the way they transact, in the way they are presented. For the shoe size thing, there are even advanced technologies with some machine learning. But consumers don't care anymore about the nice technology that fuels it. They care about outcomes. Like when now we are buying a car, less and less people really care what kind of engine is in there. You just care about, how much will it cost per kilometer and does it work? And that creates, and we need to realize it as a community of, API producers and sellers and managers, headaches. For instance, just the little thing on the right that I showed you from Nike, the subscription to a box, is creating the need for a new way of doing financial reporting. As you might have mentioned, for the old-timers, we are now with EY. EY knows this stuff very, very much. It's a headache to manage duration and to manage what we call RPU. Some people from Orange are going to come next. They know very well what RPU is when you stop thinking about selling one shoe, you think about acquiring a customer and keeping it, spending a little bit and gaining a little bit on him for years. This is a totally different way of handling financial reporting, of handling business management, and that's a headache. So for instance, if you are producing APIs that do some kind of subscription model or help enable those kind of experiences, you have to know that at one point it will be frustrating because the CFO will say, well, I'm not sure we should do that. You won't understand why. The reason is that you are creating a real problem. Once again, same thing. We created technologies that was adopted, that is now standardized, and now that it works, it creates ripples. It creates problems. The second thing it creates is that, when I was a marketer, even in technologies or in software, it was pretty cool. My job was consisting of finding one guy to bring diskettes and boxes, a few guys to distribute my software, and that was mostly the difficulty of the operations. Right now, what's happening, for instance, still at Nike, because I like that case, plus I cheated, I did it for Nike itself 6 weeks ago, so I'm fresh. They go from very simple relationship with an ecosystem that was distributors and supplier to a full ecosystem of enablers that helps them create an experience. For instance, they have relationships with Google Maps because they have an application where you can do some kind of front-keeper things through their Prime kind of services. They have a galaxy of partners that are all intricated almost like in a graph rather than like in a chain of suppliers to distributors. And that's much more complicated to handle. Because when you are in that kind of situation, when L'Oréal is starting to produce some software to help the hairdressers find a nice color for you and then enable it through an innovative product, in reality, whereas you had 1 or 2 conversations, not only do you need to have a lot of conversations, but on top of it, every decision that is made somewhere is impacting somewhere else, and you have to manage all that. So that's much harder for marketers. That's much harder for product managers, for business managers, and same thing. It's not that they don't understand APIs or don't care about tech. It's that this is a real burden for them because it's very hard to enable. For instance, we discussed with Nike, it took them about 3 years to find the right job profile for people managing the running ecosystems. Tune it, like we do in tech. Of course, consumers are becoming much more complicated too. And I say complicated, not demanding, etc. You know, they have paradoxes that didn't exist. I want to have a smartphone to take the plane, but taking the plane is bad because of carbon footprint. So I'm going to try not to take the plane, but on the other hand, I have an application that recommends me to take the plane. Customers are becoming complicated. And they ask a lot to brands around, okay, help me manage all those complexities, all those paradoxes with software, but no, it's new, with software and sometimes not software. I want to go into a boutique to buy something, but I want to choose it online, but I want to purchase it at the boutique, but I want to pay with my smartphone. So the life of the corporations that are supposed to consume and buy and purchase and use our APIs is itself becoming much more complicated. And the challenge that we'll have in the next 10 years is that we need to be part of that conversation. We cannot just say, you know, I'm a supplier, I do tech. Here's my APIs, please consume it and use it how you see fit. And the business cases, the business trades, your problems with consumers are not my problem, because they are. Because what's happening is that if we want APIs to really go to scale, let's say that in 10 years I want to do the same conversation saying, the last legacy system based on on-premise software has been turned off yesterday, which could be a good vision. Because everybody is using API, doing cool experiences, making several products. That also creates a huge challenge for any corporation, which is that the CEO needs to modify the operating model. That's what is called transformation at scale or change. It means that he has a new agenda, which is, you know, everybody must understand digital and like it within the enterprise, within the supplier, within the customers. He must do new stuff every time. You know, some companies were launching a new product every 3 years. Now, if you want to be up to market, you need to launch a new product every 2 months, every 3 months. Sometimes launch it, retweet it, relaunch it, etc., etc., etc. Same for marketing, same for the supply chain, same for everything. So he knows he needs to change his operating model. He clearly knows or heard from his IT guys that APIs can help because that's what we provide, you know, agility in functional reassembly. But the problem is that, you know, if you run a 20, even when I was Fabernovel, you know, we were a 300 company. We actually could reorganize completely in over a weekend. And it would roughly work. Because 300 people, you can still talk to them. We are working with customers, and we want to work with customers who have a lot of money, which means 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 300,000 people, employee companies, spread all over the world. And because of that, we shouldn't be ignorant of the problem we are creating when we come with your cool application to do scoring of transaction through artificial intelligence. That's what's happening to our community. And of course, we also need to start to be concerned with what I call the pleasantness of the experience, which is a burden. tell you the truth, I started my career, let's call it that way, as a software developer, as a database manager, roughly almost 40 years ago. And I chose that trade because I didn't specifically like to talk to customers. I thought it was a very cool job. I would be given a list of stuff to do. I would do them. It was a rare thing to know how to program a DB2 database at the time, and I wouldn't have to talk to anyone. Well, as you can see, I missed completely the mark, but I chose to do technologies because I thought talking to customers and sales were not my problem. The reality is that it soon became my problem. And in the end, I even had to do it. But the reality is that we also have something that's extremely uncomfortable. We have emotions as a final KPI. You know, people like the Nike stuff or don't like it. And liking is not an absolute or a specific thing. It's just something that is emotional, that is intangible. And as API producer, providers, sellers, we have to get interested in that. So if you remember last year, I said, okay, we really need, as a community, to start accepting the bullshit of marketing people and of sales people. Because if we don't, little by little, maybe not the best solution, maybe not the best guys will, end up producing and making revenue, and maybe we'll still see those numbers I showed you at the beginning about startups. And it's getting more and more complicated. Unfortunately or fortunately, if myself, I'm officially a business developer for EY-Fabernovel, if I look when I discuss about a project with a customer, all the stuff now I have to balance. I don't have to be an expert in everything. I don't have to, become the universal knowledge guy, hopefully, that thinks about it, but I have to keep that in mind all the time. I'm going to provide something to my supplier. What if in 2 years they say, well, EY-Fabernovel advised us to do that stuff that is costing a lot in carbon. Here goes my reputation and my ethics. What if in 3 years, customers are getting a little bit sick because of something we advised? And they're getting a bit sick because the experience is so cool that they overuse it. That kind of questions, although it's not the mantra, I don't have a balance scorecard that I manage all the time, it has to be kind of, I need to be aware of it, to kind of encompass it when I make a decision, when I try to sell something. And I need to also, because my customers don't necessarily, even if they're buying technology, ignore that. And they want to share with me. So I think the biggest challenge, to go back to the first question, is sales and negotiation. We are an ecosystem of API producer, which is highly technical. As I told you, just read what's on the walls in the halls. It's mostly API guys talking to API guys from IT. The more it will evolve, the more mature it will become, the more it will be used, the more we need to sell. I put there some of the, I don't like selling, so wasn't my first choice. I end up doing it, but a few things from very old people that kind of invented commerce that I kind of try to remember because, people want to buy benefits, outcomes. They don't, you have to take care of the outcome of what you're doing. You cannot just say, I'm a tech guy, I sell engines. You do whatever you want in the engines, not in 2022 anymore. Simply stuff, and well, we all know the trick. I had it once, and I had it a lot of time when I talk with the developers. You need to give your customers what they need, not what you think they need or what you'd want them to need. I was just thinking this morning again, I had a fascinating conversation. If there are some runners of startup with some tech guys, you probably know when you come back, say, okay, I saw the client, it's very cool. He wants that and he wants to use that language. And all the developers says, why? Looking at you, and they're not going to do it easily. That's kind of because that's not what they wanted to do for the customer. We need to learn to listen to the customer, to listen to what they really need, to listen to what the customer of the customer needs, and sometimes not do exactly what we wanted to do because of that. And that concerns everyone. Everyone's in sales. At the end of the day, remember the first numbers, 60% of the companies find no market, find no business. If you want to avoid that, everybody needs to think is a little bit concerned. And I put the last one just because I love that citation from Mike Tyson, and that's something I discovered in sales. Make a plan, but please, please don't get upset when it doesn't work. Plans never work. They don't stand against reality, but it's still important to plan. And we need to negotiate. So this is the Wikipedia definition of negotiation. I encourage you to read it. I try to outline the important pieces and think how many times do I have or did I train my team, even if I don't have a biz dev, even if I don't have sales, but people engaging with consumers to do that. Once again, full disclosure, my brother is a tech, he's a lead developer in a company. Listening with empathy to the outcomes that the client needs is not his forte. He's a very, very, very good developer. I'm trolling a little bit, but and I troll him every day, but you know, it's not something he likes to do. But he understands he needs to train, and as managers or as leaders, we need to tell them you have to go there. We have, as business owners, to do concessions. You know, I didn't plan on doing that on my functional roadmap, but if L'Oréal wants it, I'll do it. I won't try to explain them why they should do it the other way, because that won't work. We should, of course, but that we usually get, never forget that in the end it's about trust, and trust is about repeating, delivering. I will trust you if you do one cool thing, maybe a little bit, or say, okay. You become reliable when you've done it 2 times, 3 times, 10 times, 20 times. So we also have to make sure that all the time we want building relationship with people and negotiating. It's not a bad thing. It means that we need to keep those 6 things in mind. And I didn't invent them. I took them from the definition of negotiation. And to conclude, I found that 2 months ago, and it's really interesting. You know, Fabernovel started being inspired by the San Francisco Valley. We are not that much inspired because there's been stuff going on, and the old champions are very challenged. I'm thinking about the GAFAs, of course. But there's a new stuff going on in the Valley, and it's very interesting, I think. The MVP era, which is highly technical. MVP is a technical artifact that you produce to test something. So it's all about features, reliability, usability, is now shifting to a new stuff. I don't know if it will hold, but it's starting to grow. It's minimum viable culture. And a lot of funders, a lot of managers, even a lot of tech leaders are starting to think, you know, maybe we should think more about culture. Culture is the way you behave, is emotions, is highly subjective. It's what your organization does as a reflex. So it's hard to modify and hard to do. I think Sir Martin Sorrell said once, you know, culture is strategy for breakfast, meaning that it's a very, very difficult stuff, but it's probably, and the more I get old, one of the most important things to watch if you're running a company, because if your culture is antagonistic, your products are going to be, and you're not going to sell well. If your culture is inclusive, accepting, then you'll know how to negotiate with customers, and chances are you'll still be there in 10 years to listen to my bullshit. Thank you very much.